Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. So let's start talking about the Democratic. No, before we get to the Democratic convention, I want to talk about something else. About 2.5 weeks ago, when I was staying in a hotel on Douglas Street, Victoria, in the heart of crazy town, the hotel had a very small balcony that I used to go out to smoke cigarettes. And I'd done this dozens of times. And I was there Sunday afternoon, smoked a cigarette, finished it, went to go back in, and I was locked out of my hotel room. This was a shock, to put it mildly. I had no idea that such a thing was even possible, but there I was, locked out of my hotel room, and it was impossible for me to leave the balcony to another balcony or to the ground. No, too high up. So I started trying to make contact with people on the street, waving my hands and saying, "Hey, hey, up here, little help, trapped in my hotel room." And of course, given that this is crazy town that I was in, most people decided to stare fixedly at their shoes and to walk away as fast as they could. After about 10 minutes, a middle-aged man stopped, and I explained the situation to him. And I said, "Look, I'm in room 100. Could you just go around the corner to the lobby and let them know what's happened, and they'll come in and free me?" Well, he didn't come back after 5 minutes, and it was only about 10 minutes later that he came back, and I began to think he'd thought better of his good Samaritan act. But he came back about 10 minutes later, and he said, "There's a problem." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "There's no one at the front desk." And I noticed the hotel that I was staying in, there was often no one at the front desk. And I don't know. I thought, what am I supposed to do at this point? Am I supposed to burst into tears? Am I supposed to, start screaming obscenities into the void? But he would go to the front desk every so often, then come back to tell me that there was no one still at the front desk. And of course, at this point, I was terrified that he was going to decide, he's going to tell me that, I can't wait around here all day on the off chance that someone's going to show up at your front desk. But after I'd been trapped for about 90 minutes. And finally, I saw someone coming through my front door. Someone working for the hotel, and unlocked the balcony and then fled. Not a word of explanation or apology or anything like that. It was a very trying experience, I have to say. I didn't talk about it on the show because it just seemed, of all of the stupid things that have happened to me in my life, I think this was the stupidest. And of course, most of the stupid things that have happened to me in my life have been my own fault, but this one very much wasn't. So I leave the hotel in Victoria, and I come to a different place, the place where I am now. And I had explained to someone here about what had happened to me in Victoria, and I was assured that it's not going to be a problem here. The door locks at the bottom, but make sure that you always close the door completely when you are outside on the balcony, smoking a cigarette. So fine, I will close the door completely. Not a problem. So last night, I'm out on the balcony, and I'm reading my book. I'm up to volume 3 of Alan Walker's France Liszt. And so I finish a cigarette, and I pick up my book, and I walk over to come into the kitchen, and the door is locked. And of course, I push on the door and the other door, and nope, it is not. It is not going to open. It is simply not going to open. So I am reduced to the same thing that I had been reduced to 2.5 weeks earlier, which was shouting out from the balcony to see whether anyone could help me. And I guess it took about 10 or 15 minutes uh, before there was anyone who was interested. Okay. And finally, a couple come out, and I explain the situation, and I'm asked, do you have your keys? And no, I don't have my keys. They're in the kitchen. I normally don't take my keys out with me when I go out onto the balcony. And, various questions were asked, if there was any way for me to get in. And no, there was no way for me to get in. So this fellow comes out, and he has a ladder. And he pushes the ladder up to the balcony, and he climbs up the ladder, and he climbs onto the balcony, and he tries the doors, just to make sure that it wasn't a problem at my end, an inability to open a door, right? And he says to me, well, you can come down the ladder. And I say, it's not going to do any good because I can't get into the building. And also I am wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and have bare feet. So I'm more comfortable up here than I would be down there. In any event, it was a very warm night, one of the warmest of the years. So I had that going for me. I also had my book with me. And so we get this little delegation of people who live inside the building, and two of them involved with management of the building. And it turns out that there are no spare keys for the apartment doors. And I must say, I plunged into the slough of despair at this point. And the fire department gets called. And there's two firemen, and they are down at the bottom. And we go through the whole routine again. And they say, we could break the door. And I don't want you to break the door because it would be fabulously expensive to fix. And I really don't think the management would be happy with that at all. So the firemen were very, very nice. And again, they explained that they could bring me down. And I explained again that no, I'm more comfortable up here because there I would be outside again in a t-shirt, shorts, and barefoot. So they went away. And a locksmith was called. And I was not very happy about this for reasons you can imagine. And, the locksmith had a job to do, and then he was going to come. Well, about 3 hours. I was trapped on the balcony for about 3 hours, and finally the locksmith came with one of the nice women who had been helping me, actually two of the nice women who had been helping me. And I got the bill, which I paid. I paid $187 for the privilege of re-entering my apartment. And so then, I said I'd learned a lesson here that I was not going to close the door entirely when I was on the balcony. And the locksmith explained that, with a lot of these old doors, the clasp, it just springs loose. There's nothing holding it in place. The spring is gone or whatever. And he said that recently he had a number of jobs where he'd been forced to rescue people locked out on their balconies. So this morning, I just, the initial message, make sure that you always close the door entirely. Well, I closed the door when I was outside, just muscle memory. I closed the door and I just absolutely panicked. And I thought, if I've locked myself again, I think I'll just have to crawl in the corner and starve to death, because it would just be too embarrassing. But the door did not lock, and I pushed it open. And then I got some packing tape and I have put the tape on the clasp such that no, that thing is not coming out again. So I really don't know what to make of these two incidents, these two stupid events. Is the universe trying to tell me something? Let's see. Let's look at the chat. Great connection today. Well, I am glad to hear it. Harold McNeck, exquisite audio and video friend and in top form again. Halper says, great to see Kevin fully recovered from yesterday's boat lag. Yeah, it was, I couldn't get speed work yesterday, and I couldn't get the internet to work after being assured by my internet provider that it would just plug and play. I call my internet provider and wait on the phone for about 3/4 an hour before things were end to enable me to get access to the internet. So that's a partial explanation for yesterday's show. Let's see. James Andrew, excellent stream quality. To see Kevin in such a nice place, things are looking up. Well, yes, certainly the doom and the gloom of the Island Travelers Inn on Douglas Street. That is a low point. Anonymous Professor Kevin cleaned up his apartment. Well, I put a whole bunch of computer equipment on a glass table. Yeah, guy thought he was Kevin the cat burglar. No, this is one of the, I suppose, times when my age actually works to my advantage. You know, there aren't any 65-year-old cat burglars. Okay, I think I would literally break down the door if the landlord refused to help. I don't know. As I say, the fire department said they could have done that. I don't know exactly how that's achieved, but no, I didn't want to. I didn't want to do that. Just put duct tape on it. Yeah, as I say, I put some packing tape on it. Yeah. Chogokin 666 says, my upstairs neighbors are obsessed with vacuuming. It's demented. They vacuumed 7 hours straight yesterday. They're vacuuming again. It's probably a Roomba. Those things go on for hours, says Contra Coup. Roombas, they're fairly quiet, aren't they? I should have thought. So let's talk about the Democratic convention. Star speaker last night was Michelle Obama. And I'm trying to think of an occasion in the past where a former First Lady has delivered a political speech, Democratic Public Convention, and I can't think of one. According to NBC, it's not up to the job and change. Does anyone remember that? I recall it got an awful lot of at the time. All of these problems for Emma was president from 2009 to 2017, which forced mob to run amok. Let's see. The former lady never entertained a call to run for office, despite being one of the most popular women in the world. Says now is no time to check out. The reason why Michelle Obama is one of the most without responsibility boss. That's what she rated the boss as a woman of personal accomplishments. Unless one wants to include very impressed Obama. Oh, this is from National Couch. Anderson Cooper will be never seen before. The coronavirus changes the way we do everything. The pandemic forced them. Instead, they produced a slick, fast-moving commercial hosted by Eva Longoria Baston that featured quick speeches, music, and the testimony during an interview with 5 people before him on Queens. Let's see. Until Sanders' politicians played a secondary role, New York governor and love gov, did 24/7, whose father are immediately from as soon as they're given. The only that people are still talking about from recent political convention, well, was it 1990 defeated candidate? 96 candidate Bannon. Let's see. After Obama's speech, commentators were awesome, extraordinary moment. CNN's Wolf Blitz said, "This is how pastors this Sunday tonight." Okay, never mind the blasphemy there. She really flayed Donald, said Fox News' Chris Wallace. His colleague, Dana Perino, stumbled into an in an effort to enthusiasm for Obama. Talk of authenticity in spades. Oh dear. What authenticity? Again, she married the boss. Okay, let's go through this speech. Let's go through this one. We're already being assured is going to be remembered for many years to come. I have a hard time, and everyone is feeling it in different ways. And I know a lot of folks. Oh, it's folks, is it? Are reluctant to tune into a political convention right now or to politics in general. Believe me, I get that. But I'm here tonight because I love this country with all my heart, and it pains me to see so many people hurting. She loves America with all her heart, does she? Because she famously said in 2008, it was only after had been nominated that she loved America. I've met so many of you, I've heard your stories, and through you I've seen this country's promise. And thanks to so many who came before me, thanks to their toil and sweat and blood, I've been able to live that promise myself. You married the boss. That's the story of America. All those folks who sacrificed and overcame so much in their own times because they wanted something more, something better for their kids. There's a lot of beauty in that story. There's a lot of pain in it too. A lot of struggle and injustice and work left to do. Work apparently that your husband did not do during the 8 years when he was president. And who we choose as our president in this election will determine whether or not we honor that struggle and chip away at that injustice and keep hope alive, the very possibility of finishing that work. I'm one of a handful of people living today who have seen the immense weight and awesome power of the presidency. And let me once again tell you this, the job is hard. It requires clear-headed judgment, a mastery of complex and competing issues, a devotion to facts and history, a moral compass, and an ability to listen, and an abiding belief that each of the 330 million lives in this country has meaning and worth. Barack Obama was a very hands-off president. He got very little in the way of legislation passed, by all accounts, because he was not willing to put himself out for this legislation. A very aloof man. Words have the power to move markets. They can start wars or broker peace. They can summon our better angels or awaken our worst instincts. You cannot fake your way through this job. Well, Trump has been president for 3.5 years, and wow, he's the only president in recent history not to have started a war. That's pretty impressive, I have to say. As I've said before, being president doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. Well, the president election can reveal who we are. We are. In 4 years, people chose to believe that there didn't matter. Maybe they were up. Maybe they thought the outcome would be close. Maybe barriers felt too steep. What barriers is she talking about? What, voter ID? Whatever the reason, those choices sent someone to the Oval Office who lost the national popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. Well, you see, here's the suggestion again, that Donald Trump is not the legitimate president of the United States. In one of the states that determined the outcome, the winning margin averaged out just 2 votes per precinct. 2 votes. We've all been living with the consequences. When my husband left office with Joe Biden at his side, we had a record-breaking stretch of job creation. That's pretty funny, given that the number of people in the United States who had given up looking for work and thus are not counted as unemployed reached almost 100 million under Barack Obama's administration. We had secured the right to health care for 20 million people. We were respected around the world, rallying our allies to confront climate change as if anyone cares. And our leaders worked hand in hand with scientists to help prevent an Ebola outbreak from becoming a global pandemic. I see this is the campaign is really pushing this, that somehow this was a tremendous accomplishment for him personally, Joe Biden, that is. 4 years later, the state of this nation is very different. More than 150,000 people have died. Oh, and that's Donald Trump's fault. And our economy is in a shambles because of a virus that this president downplayed for too long. No, the economy is in a shambles because there was widespread panic, blind panic over a virus. Let's shut everything down. Let's lock everybody up. Let's see to what extent we can totally end human activity, economic activity, social activity. That's why the economy is in a shambles. It has left millions of people jobless. No, the virus hasn't left anyone jobless. It is the crazed and irresponsible decisions of politicians that has left millions of people jobless. Too many have lost their health care. I don't know what to make of that. Too many are struggling to take care of basic necessities like food and rent. Again, blind panic. Too many communities have been left in the lurch to grapple with whether and how to open our schools safely. Oh, yes. Oh, whether or not to open them at all. Well, maybe we can just cancel school forever. Internationally, we've turned our back not just on agreements forged by my husband, but on alliances championed by presidents like Reagan and Eisenhower. Oh, really? Does Trump taken the United States out of NATO? I wish he would. I wish Canada would leave NATO. It's an organization that serves no purpose whatsoever. But no, the United States still is in NATO, and Trump has been jawboning various countries, including Canada and Germany, to start paying their share, which would be a good thing, wouldn't it? And here at home, as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and a never-ending list of innocent people of color, a never-ending list. No, actually, its list has an end. Continue to be murdered. People of color. I thought that was that expression was considered to be not the said thing anymore. Stating the simple fact that a Black Life Matters is still met with derision from the nation's highest office. No, it isn't. That's an outright lie. Because whenever we look to this White House for some leadership or consolation or some semblance of steadiness, what we get is chaos, division, and a total and utter lack of empathy. Actually, you could be describing America's inner cities: chaos, division, and total and utter lack of empathy. Empathy. That's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, the ability to walk in someone else's shoes, the recognition that someone else's experience has value too. Most of us practice this without a second thought. I do not believe for a second that Michelle Obama practices very much empathy. She seems a monster of egotism. If we see someone suffering or struggling, we don't stand in judgment. We reach out because there, but for the grace of God, go I. It is not a hard concept to grasp. It is what we teach our children. You're really pushing the boat out there, Michelle Obama, because again, America's inner cities are characterized by an almost total lack of empathy. And like so many of you, Barack and I have tried our best to instill in our girls a strong moral foundation to carry forward the values that our parents and grandparents poured into us. It's funny that she doesn't mention what those values are. But right now, kids in this country are seeing what happens when we stop requiring empathy of one another. Yeah, I feel your pain, as Bill Clinton said. What was it that George Bush said? message, I care, the first George Bush. They're looking around wondering if we've been lying to them this whole time about who we are and what we truly value. They see people shouting in grocery stores, unwilling to wear a mask to keep us all safe. Those that's the worst example of lack of empathy that she could come up with. Every day in the United States, people are shot to death over trifles, over bumping into someone in a store or a street. They see people calling the police on folks minding their own business just because of the color of their skin. Sure, keep saying that. Maybe we'll make it true. They see an entitlement that says only certain people belong here, that greed is good and winning is everything. Probably not a good idea for Mr. or Mrs. Obama to talk about greed. What would the stories about them becoming the first billionaire ex-presidential couple? Because as long as you come out on top, it doesn't matter what happens to everyone else. And here we go with the empathy again. And they see what happens when that lack of empathy is ginned up into outright disdain. They see our leaders labeling fellow citizens enemies of the state while emboldening torch-bearing white supremacists. It's an outright lie. They watch in horror as children are torn from their families and thrown into cages. An outright lie. And people's pepper spray and rubber bullets are used on peaceful protesters for a photo op. Once again, an outright lie. Sadly, this is the America that is on display for the next generation, a nation that's underperforming not simply on matters of policy, but on matters of character. And that's not just disappointing, it's downright infuriating, because I know the goodness and the grace that is out there in households and neighborhoods all across this nation. And I know that regardless of our race, age, religion, or politics, when we close out the noise and the fear and truly open our hearts, we know that what's going on in this country is not just right. It's just not right. Oh, yes. Of course, the Obamas are characterized for their, I don't know, how would you say, liberal attitude towards dissenting opinions. This is absolutely hilarious. And of course, it is the very opposite of their truth. So what do we do now? Where's our strategy? Oh, over the past 4 years, a lot of people have asked me, when others are going so low, does going high still really work? My answer, going high is the only thing that works, because when we go low, when we use those same tactics of degrading and dehumanizing others, we just become part of the ugly noise that's drowning out everything else. This is pure projection. She's just gone on for several paragraphs about how the President of the United States and his supporters, they lack empathy, that they're monstrous people. But of course, she will continue to go high when others go low. We degrade ourselves. We degrade the very causes for which we fight. But let's be clear, going high does not mean putting on a smile. Yes. Michelle Obama is one of the rare people who actually looks more frightening when she is smiling than when she isn't, and saying nice things when confronted by viciousness and cruelty. Oh, yeah, see, that's who the Democrats are up against. Viciousness and cruelty. Going high means taking the harder path. It means scraping and clawing our way to the mountaintop. You married the boss. Going high means standing fierce against hatred, while remembering that we are one nation under God, and if we want to survive, we've got to find a way to live together and work together across our differences. And going high means unlocking the shackles of lies and mistrust with the only thing that can set us free, the cold, hard truth. Yeah, okay. Didn't you just say that Trump threw children in cages? So let me be as clear as I possibly can. Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He's had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what is. I understand that won't be heard by some people. We live in a nation deeply divided, and I'm a Black woman speaking at the Democratic Convention. Oh, how brave of you. How brave. What are you, the only Black woman speaking at the convention? I suspect there will be dozens. But enough of you know by now. You know that I tell you exactly what I feel. Oh, I hate politics. Why are you making a? What I feel. Oh, I hate politics. Why are you making a about this nation? You know how much I care about all of children. I guess that's why you force them to sleep at lunch. So if you take one thing from my worst night, it is this: if you think things cannot possibly get worse, trust me, it can. And if we could change this election, if we have any hope of ending this chaos, we've got Joe Biden, like our lives depend. I know Joe, he's a profoundly man guided by faith. He was a president, whatever that might mean. He knows what it takes to rescue an economy, beat back a pandemic, lead our country. No, he doesn't, because he's never had any power. And he doesn't speak very good at going out on the campaign trail. It doesn't take much for him to start snarling at vote. Then she gets into personal tragedies. Joe Biden wants all of our kids to go to a good school, see a doctor, and live on a healthy planet, and he's got plans to make all of that happen. Okay, all kids go to a good school, see a doctor when you're sick, live on a healthy planet. Why didn't Obama all that happen when Obama was president and Joe Biden was vice president? They're closing down polling places in minority neighborhoods, pushing rolls. Well, voter rolls obviously should be purged on a regular basis because people die. They leave the country. They're sending people out to intimidators. No, that's an outright lie, and they're lying about the security of ballots. Security of ballots? You mean, for instance, in Nevada, where the law allows assistance to be given to people in filling out their ballots? Yes. Look, we have already sacrificed so much this year. Who's this we that you speak of, Kimo Sabe? You sacrificed at all. So many of you are already going that extra mile, even we're exhausted and mustering up unimaginable courage to put on those scrubs and give our loved ones a chance. When you're anxious, you're delivering those packed in those shelves, doing all essential work so that all of us can keep moving forward. Even when it all feels so overwhelming, working parents are somehow piecing it all together without child care. Teachers getting creative. Yeah, getting creative, all right. They're sitting at home in front of a computer for an hour or two a day. That's some pretty impressive creativity. Finally, the peroration. This is the truest form of empathy, not just feeling, but doing, not just for ourselves or our kids, but for everyone, for all our kids. That's a confusing sentence. And if we want to keep the possibility of progress alive in our time, if we want to be able to look our children in the eye after this election, we've got to reassert our place in American history. Well, what do you mean, look our children in the eye? Americans are going to be given the opportunity in November to select either Biden or Trump. And according to the rules of Electoral College, that's how the president is chosen. Again, she is insinuating here that the only possible moral choice is to vote for Joe Biden, and that, again, anyone who would not vote for Joe Biden lacks morality, lacks empathy, is a vicious person. The cult of Michelle Obama, again, it speaks to the feminization of our culture because, again, this woman has never achieved anything in her life. And it's a kind of soap opera logic, that women watch soap operas and then they see these women who become, presidents of companies and, oh, well, of course, they're going to be great because, how hard could it be running a company? And it's, I suppose a lot of women fantasize about being someone like Michelle Obama, that you marry some man and he becomes president of the United States, and suddenly everyone is showering you with praise and you become the cynosure of all eyes. And then, of course, when you leave office, you and your husband start getting paid. Yes, Breitbart points out a fact checked by the Associated Press said the references to cages is misleading and a matter that Democrats have persistently distorted. Trump used facilities that were built during the Obama-Biden administration to house children. at the border. They are chain link enclosures inside border facilities where migrants were temporarily housed, separated by sex and age. At the height of the controversy over Trump's zero tolerance policy at the border, photos that circulated online of children in the enclosures generated great anger. But these photos by the American press were taken in 2014 and depicted some of the thousands of unaccompanied children held by President Barack Obama. How about that? Kyle Kalinske, Secular Talk on Twitter, this has been retweeted over 11,000 times. The moment Trump won the election, and we have Eva Longoria Baston introducing someone who calls himself Billy Porter. And you have old Stephen Stills playing his Stratocaster for a song that was a hit for his band Buffalo Springfield in 1966 or early 67. So 53 years old. Billy Porter is clearly the gayest man in America, and he is performing in front of a distorted American flag, where everything is dark and the stars are red, and he's wearing this kind of long coat, which is kind of serves as a vest, and it's just, oh dear. It's just too funny. Who is Billy Porter? Well, according to Wikipedia, he was born in 1969. He's an American actor and singer. And he is now the star of a show called Pose. In 2019, he won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor for Pose, becoming the first openly gay black man to be nominated and win in any lead actor category in the Primetime Emmys. Yes, another one of these, the firsts. So what do we know about this show, Pose? It's an American drama series about New York City's African-American and Latino alphabet people and gender non-conforming ballroom culture scene in the 1980s. And in the second season, early 1990s. Featured characters are dancers and models who compete for trophies and recognition in this underground culture and who support one another in a network of chosen families known as houses, created by Ryan Murphy. There's a shocker. Ryan Murphy? Yeah. So it appears that television has to become all black all the time, but apparently it has to be all gay all the time as well. And I continue to be rather nonplussed that what appears to be a complete takeover of American black culture by homosexuals, both male and female, seems to excite such little comment, let alone resistance. Again, I'm just thinking about his routine last night to Steve Stills song. Let's see. The 2019 Golden Globes, Porter gained attention for wearing an embroidered suit and pink cape designed by Randy Rahm. He continued to make fashion waves that year when he wore a fitted tuxedo jacket and a velvet gown by Christian Siriano with 6-inch Rick Owens boots to the 91st Academy Awards. In February 2019, he was an official Council of Fashion Designers of America ambassador for New York Fashion Week. Porter attended the 2019 Met Gala and embraced the camp notes on fashion theme by being carried on a litter by 6 America ambassador for New York Fashion Week. Porter attended the 2019 Met Men while sporting a sun god ensemble. He's exactly the sort of a person to appeal to middle America, wouldn't you say? Song by the Buffalo Springfield from early 1967 is completely inappropriate for the Democratic National Convention for all sorts of reasons. What's the song about? It's about what became known as the Sunset Strip riots in 1966. There were a lot of clubs like the Whiskey A Go Go on the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. And so there was a lot of street traffic, people on the street, and motorists were complaining that their cars were being blocked and that it was it was slowing things down tremendously in the Sunset Strip. So there was a curfew proclaimed, and the kids were not going to stand up for the they're not going to put up with this curfew, and there was some difficulty, and that's what this song is about. But in a broader sense, the song, I suppose, is kind of a warning to adults that there's a generational transformation going on, and they had better pay attention. I'm just going to go through the words here. There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man over there telling me I got to beware. And let's look at what's happened in the streets of America since the death in police custody of George Floyd. What it is exactly clear. Real anarchy, chaos, mass looting, and destruction. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. Well, there are no men with guns telling the looters in Chicago and elsewhere, telling the, the anarchists, the insurrectionists in Portland that they got to beware. No. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Again, this warning, whereas what's happening now, it's quite clear. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. There should be a call for what? Liberalism? Instead, we're being told that Black lives matter, but what about shut up, bigot? No, but what about shut up, bigot? White supremacy, systemic racism. Don't you dare disagree with us about anything, or you will be destroyed. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street singing songs and carrying signs, mostly saying, hooray for our side. What is Black Lives Matter? But hooray for our side, and our side only, and everyone else get in line and shut up. Paranoia strikes deep into your life. It will creep. It starts when you're always afraid to step out of line, the man come and take you away. This is absolutely hilarious in the context of COVID-19, where paranoia is the official government policy and has been for half a year, that every other person on earth represents a deadly threat to you personally. Everyone is at risk, even though we know that that is not the case. And it starts when you're always afraid. This is official government policy. From the CDC, from Dr. Fauci, in Britain, in Canada, that you must always be afraid. And health officials have admitted this. If people stop being afraid, then we're gonna lose control. So the panic must be kept up. As I say, the song's completely inappropriate. Also, I suppose it's inappropriate in the sense that, demonstrations on the street and riots, chaos, of course, they featured very heavily in the 1968 election. And as we know, the more mayhem there was on the streets, the worse the chances for the Democrats in that election. The only reason that it was close between Nixon and Humphrey was because George Wallace was running as a third candidate and won over 10% of the vote. So no, this stuff does not help the Democrats, but they don't seem to have learned anything from 1968. I suppose, of course, most of them weren't alive. Stephen Colbert is a comedian, isn't he? I've been assured that he's a comedian. He's not funny, but of course that's not required any longer. Joe Biden says this year's election is the battle for the soul of the nation, but we're calling it something else. Endgame. And it's a parody of what Marvel movies. And you've got Michelle Obama and Barack Obama and Pete Buttigieg and a whole bunch of Democrats as superheroes. Oh, here's Kamala Harris as a superhero, literal superheroes, and of course Trump as a villain. It's just there's just one of him against all these superheroes. Universal mental retardation, as Shiva Naipaul would have said. These people can only think as children. They don't know what art is anymore. They just recognize cartoons. Let's see what else happened at the Democratic National Convention last night. According to Breitbart, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. Oh, and there's a D next to it. Oh, what? What are you saying, that it couldn't be an R? No, it couldn't be an R. Speaking at Monday night's DNC, with Black Lives Matter Plaza as her backdrop, says she wants her daughter to grow up in an America where the president doesn't fan the flames of racism. Well, Barack Obama was not shy about fanning the flames of racism, if you will, when he was president of the United States. Even before he became president, when he famously threw his grandmother, who had raised him and supported him, under the bus, because apparently after she had been mugged by a black man, she showed some fear of black men in public. Let's see. Bowser emphasized the Democratic Party's unsaid theme of racial justice. It's unsaid, is it? In her brief remarks Monday night, stating that the story of the nation's capital is the story of, wait for it, reckoning. It was here that John Lewis and Dr. King spoke on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Yes, let's go back to the 1960s. We had For What It's Worth, and we're going to talk about the civil rights movement again. I guess if you go back to the 1960s, then it's possible to pretend that the civil rights movement wasn't ultimately a colossal failure. Oh, she expressed horror that President Trump walked to St. John's Church and held up a Bible, a symbolic action he took after those peaceful protests set the church ablaze. But while we were peacefully protesting, these people cannot stop lying. Donald Trump was plotting, or you could say that he was enforcing his oath of office. He stood in front of one of our most treasured houses of worship. It's funny how religious these people get at certain times, election times. He sent troops in camouflage into our streets. He sent tear gas into the air. Well, where else are you going to send tear gas into? Federal helicopters, too. I know if he did this to D.C., he would do it to your city or town, and that's when I said, enough. She said, bringing up her daughter, blah, blah, blah. We have to undo the laws and systems that have codified racism for far too long. Can you explain them? Can you explain which laws in the United States codify racism? But we have to do something too. Each and every one of us challenge our own biases, she continued. No, you first. You first, Mayor Bowser. I want to see you challenge your own bias. If we see something, do something. If we see something, do something. Together we can turn this reckoning into a reimagining of a nation. What, are you going to start over again? Where we the people means all the people, she added. Ending her speech by introducing George Floyd's family, who held a moment of silence. Obviously, under a partisan political system in the United States, we the people is it's a noble myth. That's all it is. But no, let's all give up a moments of silence for the family of a lifelong thug who died most likely from a fentanyl overdose, which had reduced him to raving, screaming, and an inability to breathe. That is the great American hero now. Representative Karen Bass, Trump is trying to stay in power so he can stay out of jail. Tuesday on CNN, she said Trump was questioning mass mail-in voting because he was trying to run out the statute of limitations on so many of the laws he broke. I think that we've known from the beginning the president has been essentially saying things like this from the moment it became real to him that he did not win the popular vote. Does Representative Karen know how presidents are elected? Because again, this is not the first time that man has an electoral college or the popular vote. And ever since then, he's been looking for mysterious voters, mysterious cheats. In the last election, a major case of voter fraud was with Republicans in North Carolina. So we know that this is just fake. Oh, there's no history of Democrats. Just this by Trump sows the seeds of dissension that if and when he loses, the election is rigged. That really sets the stage for a lot of chaos, sets the stage for civil unrest and violence. See, Democrats are against civil unrest and violence now, are they? It's just sure that he would be that desperate that he would resort to tactics like this. When we get rid of this administration, there will be so many new laws and regulations. Look, when we get rid of this administration, we can go through this again with somebody who will us and that would resort to anything to stay in power. What are you going to ban people, certain people running from office? Perhaps you could ban the Republican Party. That would make it easier. I do believe one of his main motivations for staying in power is he's trying to remove limitations on some. He broke some of them, which I don't even think he would be able to do if he was second term, but heaven help us. So more wit and wisdom. Ayanna Pressley, who is at Representative Massachusetts, she is a member of the Squad, if I recall correctly, and she is now completely bald. She has alopecia, and she said some months ago that she wasn't going to try to hide it. I don't know. I think she would be bad to hide it, frankly. But of course, she is wearing fake eyebrows. It's one thing to have a bald head, but the lack of eyebrows is really disconcerting to people. Saturday, MSNBC, Representative Pressley called for, quote, unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives, unquote. This as sedition, actually. I don't know if his feelings are on the ballot, but that we've lost hundreds of thousands of American lives that were preventable. Oh, it's up to hundreds. It's not preventable by Donald Trump. How? How is it preventable by Donald Trump? Again, he had this magic wand on his desk in the Oval Office, and all he had to wave the magic wand, and COVID-19 would be vanquished. I suspect that these people actually believe this, notwithstanding the fact that they're constantly lauding the achievements of Democratic governors, even Governor Death, Andrew Cuomo. So how is it that the governors or the mayors seem to be responsible for the policies regarding COVID-19, but ultimately this is Trump's responsibility? As Dan Rather reminds us, cheaters are going to cheat. Wow, that's some fancy oratory there. So the only way he thinks that he can even be remotely successful is to suppress and to undermine our democracy, beginning with the United States Postal Service. Yes, this is suddenly the Democrats and the left in the United States, they're in love with the USPS. I don't recall in the past very many people having much good to say about the USPS, but apparently the USPS is now the last guardian of freedom in the United States. Oh, those families, those who rely upon the critical services that the Postal Service provides. At every turn, they have sought to obstruct, stonewall, and evade justice and accountability. Oh, I just can't wait for the coming indictments against Obama's administration. I just can't wait. There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives, and unfortunately, there's plenty to go around. What do you mean, unfortunately? Really? Not unfortunately at all. because a bunch of people went nuts in the United States after George Floyd's death. Actually, many thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, and now it's all black. Thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, and now it's all Black Lives Matter. Oh, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, and only Black Lives Matter. That does not sound like an unfortunate occurrence to a black politician such as Ayanna Pressley. No, it sounds like her wildest dreams have come true. No, it sounds like her wildest dreams have come true. That's what it seems like to me. Yeah. USPS to suspend changes until after election. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy said agency won't remove equipment or cut hours amid congressional scrutiny ahead of an expected surge in mail-in voting. But this is from Mediaite. Today, Trump floats invalidating election over mail-in voting, says election may have to be held again. During his announcement of a posthumous presidential pardon for pioneering women's rights activist Susan B. Anthony, who died in 1906, Trump was asked about his feud with the Democratic Party over mail-in voting. He said the Democrats want to make it a political issue. It's not a political issue. It's really about a correct vote. You have to get voting right. You can't have millions and millions of ballots sent all over the place, sent to people that are dead, sent to dogs, cats, sent to everyone. This is a serious situation. This isn't games, and you have to get it right. I just want to get it right. Win, lose, or draw. I think I'm going to win. Win, lose, or draw. We have to get it right. We have to have honest voting. You can't take millions of ballots, send them haphazardly all over the country or all over a state and expect it to come out properly. By the way, absentee is great. It's been working for a long time in Florida. Absentee, you request it, it comes in, and then you send it back. Absentee is great, but universal is going to be a disaster, the likes of which our country has never seen. It'll end up being a rigged election, or they will never come out with an outcome. They have to do it again, and nobody wants that, and I don't want that. Now, cue the outrage. But there's another world leader who's actually doing more than talking about delaying an election. We'll get to that person in a minute. One would think that any politician, regardless of party or policy, would believe in the sanctity, if you will, of the voting process, and that every step must be taken to ensure that the voting is true and reliable. But the Democrats do not take that line. And it's obvious that they benefit from fraudulent voting. Because if they didn't benefit from fraudulent voting, they would be calling for all necessary safeguards to determine that only people who are eligible to vote get to vote. And of course, they only vote once. It's that simple. This should not be a partisan issue. But the Democrats have very much made it a partisan issue. And they keep on insisting, that there are, millions of black people being disenfranchised because they do not have voting ID. Well, most states make voting ID available for free. It's easy to do. In any event, in the absence of identification, it is very difficult to do anything in the United States of America, as I learned when I lived there. And everybody knows that. I suppose these black people never get on airplanes, for instance, because, of course, you need identification, photo ID, to get on an airplane. I guess, in their teens, or actually in their 20s, they never buy alcohol or cigarettes because, of course, you need photo ID to buy alcohol and cigarettes. I could give many such examples. But again, the media has been very much everybody needs ID. How can you rent a say without ID? You can't. All right. They all know this, but they pretend that insisting upon photo ID is somehow sinister and racist. Let's go to the chat. Glib Medley, Ayanna Pressley, too many hair treatments. I don't know. As I say, I heard that she has alopecia. And her eyebrows fell out as well. Manfred von Tisselbaum says BLM Antifa are ideological movements. The civil rights movement is irrelevant to their narrative. Well, I think it's relevant to the extent that they pose as the legitimate inheritors of that narrative. Tweety Bird says, I hope the left is enjoying their own conspiracy theories. Yes, well, of course they do. Of course they do. Halper preserve the inner party's monopoly on electoral fraud. Yes, yes, indeed. Again, I just, this should not be controversial. That no one, no politician, would actually dare to suggest that, oh no, we don't need to worry about security of ballots. No, of course, you always need to worry about it, and you always need to take whatever steps are necessary to make sure that the voting is fair. Honest voting would put Dems at under 24%. Well, I wouldn't go that far. Tweety Bird, Dems can't win without massive cheating and fraud. Yes. The rule of thumb has been, pretty much from the time that I first started following politics when I was a boy, that the Democrats need to win presidential elections by 2 to 3, or the Republicans need to win by 2 to 3%. They need a 2 to 3% cushion, otherwise the Democrats will steal the election. YT says, damn, this wine spritzer is the best drink ever. I like it even better than the hard cider, which I love. Okay. Brendan Smith says 2016 was close, and that was with a household name in Hillary that was hated by so many. That's true. Hillary was hated by so many, but of course she was loved by a certain type of woman, say. Joe Biden is not going to inspire the level of veneration among women, certain women, that Hillary Clinton did. Joe Biden is simply not an inspiring person, not at all. Definitely Trump landslide, says de Boreas. No, I don't know. I think that Trump would win in a fair election, but I don't know whether there's going to be a fair election. And I suspect that in many places, the number of votes counted is going to be far more than the total number of eligible voters in the precincts. Manfred von Thistlebaum, but they are against the equal opportunity narrative the original civil rights movement procured. Disparity post-civil rights proves to them that racism must be systemic. Yeah, the equal opportunity, sure. But I mean, even during the civil rights era, had this talk about affirmative action, right? I mean, affirmative action existed before it was mandated by the government. It was unofficial. That black people, because of what they'd suffered, need a leg up. And then it was codified very quickly. I mean, you see this with Jesse Jackson and the scams that he was running on various companies, the shakedowns that he was running. That it very quickly became about Gibbs. And now, it's all about Gibbs. I just, what's missing from this discussion of systemic racism, or a discussion basically of the position of black people in American society, is to what extent are they responsible for this themselves? To what extent, could they do better? That they could, to what extent could they modify their behavior such that they achieved more and got in trouble with the law less? I mean, this is never discussed. It is never, ever discussed. Now we're hearing this this meme, that black people have to work twice as hard or 4 times as hard as white people. And I suppose they actually believe it, but it's against everything that we know to be true. Let's see. What else do we have here? William Hicks says, doesn't the BLM Antifa narrative require everyone to pretend the civil rights movement and great society never happened? Yes, I think that is true. I mean, tremendous steps were taken in the 1960s, and essentially, the Constitution was, I don't know, it was suspended. No, I mean, various freedoms that Americans have, we're going to take them away from Americans because we need to heal this racial divide. And we are going to start pouring trillions and trillions of dollars into the pockets of black people, into black neighborhoods, into various betterment schemes. But apparently things are worse than they have ever been. And of course, the more that is spent on black people by white people, the more seemingly they hate white people. DB Cooper says Colbert used to be funny when he had better writers and played a character. Now that he's not in character and just announcing Drumpf constantly, it's not funny. Stephen Colbert, he seems like a very nasty person. I mean, that's certainly the impression that I get from him, having followed his career for a very long time. Instead of war like 1968, we have a pandemic, says Emmett Kelly's Earth. Oh, Halper says Norman Mailer said everyone at the convention knew Humphrey would lose. Well, it was a damn close run thing. Nixon, he ran a very bad campaign in 1968. You can read about it in Joe McGinnis's book, The Selling of the President, 1968. Essentially, Nixon, ran a victory lap for several months, and as a result, he almost lost to Hubert Humphrey. David Wright says, all the hearkening back to the 60s from these old radicals just means a death knell to them and the rise of, I don't know. I mean, I've complained about this for years and years and years, that it seems like, whenever you turn on PBS, oh, yes, the 1960s. I'm sick of the 1960s, and I lived through it. I can't imagine how sick people must be who never lived through the 1960s. Emma Kelly-Sir says also in 1968, LBJ stopped all the bombing of North Vietnam just before the election, which boosted Hubert Humphrey. Yeah, it did. It did. The October surprise. Tweety Bird says Zero Hedge published the long doctor's letter to Fauci indicting him for his handling of the current health crisis and calling on HCQ to be distributed widely, among many other things. Yes, I'm going to be talking about HCQ in a little while. Dennis Dale says, so much resistance from behind makes me want to smack the songwriter. Yes, it is awkward. It is an awkward line. Is it not? Phlegmaticus says, Dickens captured the ersatz empathy of liberals well with Mrs. Jellyby. Again, Michelle Obama, she does not look like a very pleasant person at all. Her face is plastered with an almost permanent scowl, but then when she smiles, she looks rather terrifying, much like a Doberman pinscher when it bares its teeth. William Heck says that business with Dr. Ford, was that an example of going high? Seem to recall the Democratic senators, especially Harris, pushing the she needs to be believed narrative with all the passion of hate week. Manfred Francisco has a comment about Cardi B, which I am not going to answer. Oh, Dennis Dale, he was wearing his Dowager Empress getup. Oh, okay. Billy Porter, of course, his name isn't really Billy Porter. Oh, yeah. Again, they're looking forward, but it's always the 1960s. It's always the 1960s in their world, at least with, Bill Clinton. He was all about the Fleetwood Mac Rumors album. So, he had moved on a whole decade. Trump blames Democrats, Biden, AOC for rolling blackouts in California. This is from the New York Post today. The president said every American would face the same problem, that is to say, power shortages and rolling historic blackouts, if Joe Biden were elected and able to implement the Green New Deal pushed by the left flank of his party but defeated in the Senate last year. In California, Democrats have intentionally implemented rolling blackouts, forcing Americans in the dark. Democrats are unable to keep up with energy demand, he tweeted Tuesday afternoon. Meanwhile, I gave America energy independence. In fact, so much energy we could use it all. The Bernie Biden AOC Green New Deal plan would take California's failed policy to every American. Golden State is enduring its first rolling blackouts in 19 years, leaving millions of Californians without power. California's non-energy company, the California Independent System, blamed high heat and increased electricity demand. Why so much increased electricity demand in the state of California? Could it be immigration? That may be doubling the population of your state within a couple of decades. Aren't these people environmentalists, supposed to be freaks? But apparently, immigration has no effect on environment at all, even though we know that the amount of pollution by people who move to the first world, it's just warming. It's it's bogus models, global warming. It's it's bogus models, both with. But let's talk about the carbon footprint once again. People from third to the our world, their carbon footprint increases by 8 times. But the state of California currently believes that more people better, and already got to the point. Apply electricity. And what does Governor Gavin Newsom have to say about this? He said it shouldn't have taken place in the innovative state. What does that mean? These blackouts, which occurred without prior warning or enough time for preparation. yeah. If they'd given warning, are unacceptable and the nation's largest and most innovative state. This cannot stand. Okay, so previously shaking their fist at COVID-19, take that virus. Yeah, what are you going to do about that? Now, what they're shaking their fist at the power grid. That power grid has decided, to start playing games with us. Yeah, well, we know how to play games too. He's a child. Only a child would talk like that. Now, this is a good campaigning, I think. This is from Breitbart. Trump on Monday met with Minneapolis business owners affected by the destructive riots in the name of George Floyd. The president criticized former vice president's running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, for asking for donations to help bail out the rioters who had been arrested for violence and looting. Their sympathies lie with lawbreakers and with criminals. My heart is with law-abiding, hardworking Americans like these people. And my heart is also with the great men and women of law enforcement. While the city's liberal mayor refused to defend its citizens, which was incredible, their lives were destroyed, while the leadership of the Democrats cheered. Their dreams burned to the ground, Trump said. Minneapolis firefighter Corboy Bala and his wife told the story about how he spent his life savings to open a sports bar before it was destroyed by rioters. Bala said he was working to rebuild the bar and was currently working to get financing to purchase a building for $1.3 million. Trump suggested it might be possible for Bala to get government assistance and asked for the name of the bar. The bikers over there, they'll be there, like even if it's been burned down, they will be there, Trump said with a chuckle, referring to some of his Bikers for Trump supporters. Bala laughed and said the name of his bar was Scores Sports Bar. The president also welcomed Jim Stage, owner of Lloyd's Pharmacy, operating the same building for more than 100 years before it was looted and burned to the ground during the riots. Thank you, Mr. President, for fighting for law and order in American cities, and we ask that other politicians rise to the same challenge of protecting our businesses and our neighborhoods. Well, as we've heard, a great many Democratic politicians have made it clear that property is not important, that only people are important. Of course, buildings don't have any autonomous existence except for the needs of people, which is something the politicians don't seem to understand. Those selfish buildings constantly wasting our police and firefighting resources with their endless demands not to be burned down. But no, they've made it clear again and again that no, we are going to instruct the police not to protect property because, of course, who needs property? I mean, come on. Property. What's that all about? Again, from the New York Post. New photos show Bill Clinton getting massage from Epstein accuser. Newly unearthed photos show former President Bill Clinton, who will deliver a key address to the Democratic National Convention on Tuesday night, receiving a neck massage from alleged Jeffrey Epstein victim Shantae Davies following a flight on the financier's infamous Lolita Express. Would you mind giving it a crack? Davis recalled Clinton asking, according to the Daily Mail, which published the pictures. Clinton, 56 at the time of the September 2002 snaps, was en route to Africa for a humanitarian trip with Epstein and his entourage. That is a weird picture. When the Lolita Express, Epstein's private jet, landed in Portugal for refueling. While we were in the terminal, the ex-president was complaining of stiffness from falling asleep in his chair. Oh, private jet not good enough for you, Bill? Davies, then a 22-year-old massage therapist who worked as Epstein's personal masseuse, was egged on by Ghislaine Maxwell, now charged with procuring underage girls for Epstein. Ghislaine chimed in to be funny and said that I could give him a massage, Davies said. Everyone had a little chuckle, but Ghislaine, in her prim British accent, insisted, and I said I was good. She complied, with photos showing her working over the neck of a beaming Bubba. Okay. The massage took an awkward turn when Davies requested Clinton change positions, using a poor choice of words in light of the former president's Oval Office sex scandal with intern Monica Lewinsky. I've got a bad angle. Would you mind getting on your knees? She recalled. I'm not sure what came over me. For a moment, the room fell silent. I couldn't believe I'd said that. The words just shot out before I realized what I was saying or who I said it to, wrote Davies in her soon-to-be-released memoir. But she says that despite the uneasy moment, President Clinton was a perfect gentleman during the trip, and I saw absolutely no foul play involving him. The group, which also included actors Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker, two notorious philanthropists, visited Ghana, Nigeria, Rwanda, Mozambique, and South Africa during the 5-day humanitarian jaunt. Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker. Yes, and what's happening with the Deep Estate? This is from Heavy.com. Kevin Kleinsmith is a former FBI lawyer expected to be accused, and he has been now formally accused, of altering an email that was used to justify a court's wiretap approval into Carter Page, a former advisor for Donald Trump. He's also the author of anti-Trump and anti-Mike Pence texts that resulted in his leaving the Russia investigation. You can read those texts throughout this article. One of the more memorable ones declared, "Viva la résistance." Viva? Okay. Wouldn't that be vive? Kleinsmith may be referred, well, he has been, yes. On August 14th, the Times reported that Kleinsmith, a former FBI lawyer, intends to plead guilty to falsifying a document as part of a deal with prosecutors conducting their own criminal inquiry of the Russia investigation. Kleinsmith plans to admit that he altered an email from the CIA that investigators relied upon to seek renewed court permission in 2017 for a secret wiretap on the former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, who had at times provided information to the spy agency. Yeah, so I guess we can expect him to sing. Let's talk about what's going on in Portland. Police named 25-year-old Marquise Love as suspect in beating of Portland man. The Portland Police Bureau said in a statement, yesterday we began an investigation of an assault that occurred in the downtown area where an adult male associated to a white pickup truck was violently assaulted. Investigators positively identify the suspect as 25-year-old Marquise Love. Investigators made attempts to contact Love but could not locate him. Love was allegedly captured on video kicking the victim in the head as he sat on the ground after being beaten by several rioters, knocking the man unconscious. Yes, Love's Facebook page showed that he listed himself as an armed security guard at Portland International Airport. According to the Post-Millennial, Love was previously charged with fourth-degree assault and harassment in a 2017 domestic violence casebook at Washington County Community Correction Center in Hillsboro, Oregon. The PPB also said that the victim, identified on social media as Adam Hayner, has been released from the hospital and is recovering, despite rumors that he is not recovering or dead. The PPB said investigators are still trying to locate a transgender female who was robbed in the area of Southwest Taylor Street and 4th Avenue, where the incident began. The transgender woman was seen on video interacting with and later being beaten by the same group that allegedly beat Hayner. In other videos, she is sitting on the ground begging for her belongings back. Hayner appears to be in one video consoling her. I've read something to the effect that there seem to be a great many transsexuals involved in the violence in Portland. In particular, this one man. He looks, well, no, a woman. I suppose I don't want to misgender this person. Looks like just a man, like I don't know, like a 40-year-old man. With beard, unshaved look. I suppose a hair a little longer, and wearing a dress. I guess that's all it takes. Well, you don't even need the dress. You just have to declare that you are a woman. Again, and this is from the New York Post. The man who was viciously beaten by BLM protesters in Portland had been trying to intervene in a mugging before he was kicked unconscious, according to a witness. Drew Hernandez, a YouTuber who filmed the episode, said the man, Adam Hayner, was defending a transgender woman being beaten and robbed by protesters Sunday before the group went after him. They were physically assaulting her like crazy, so when they were doing that, I actually started defending her, and then they shifted their attention on him. Hernandez said it started getting violent, so the victim got into his truck and attempted to escape. He starts revving his engine because I think he feels threatened, said Hernandez, who claims he has a full video of this. I think he was just trying to scare them because, to be honest with you, if you really wanted to run someone over, he definitely could have done it. Hayner then drove away, but the mob continued to follow him, Hernandez said. They just went nuts and started following him up the street. He would stop and kind of pull back, just trying to get rid of him, but he didn't hit any of them. The crowd chased him for a few blocks before he crashed his vehicle and got out. When they finally caught up to him, they went nuts. One of the BLM militants pulled out his own baton, started hitting him, telling him to get on the floor. They start punching him in the face, physically assaulting him. Then out of nowhere, one of the guys comes out of nowhere and drop kicks him from behind. I've been told that recently in Portland, Black Lives Matter protesters have been congregating outside apartment buildings and demand that white residents of these apartment buildings abandon their apartments as reparations for the suffering endured by Black people. Yes, they're actually attempting to evict white people. Now, of course, the Black population of Portland is a mere 6%. A final story from the New York Post. A group of looters busted for ransacking high-end stores in Chicago were mostly college student, unemployed parents, and convicted felons, according to a report. The night of mayhem came around an hour after police shot and injured a 20-year-old man who they claimed fired at them first near his home in Englewood on August 10th. More than 100 people were arrested in connection to the looting and destruction, which injured more than a dozen officers and targeted high-end stores such as Gucci, Dior, and Apple. Mayor Lori Lightfoot suggested that a false rumor on social media that the police had shot a child sparked the neighborhood unrest. But none of the defendants charged were residents of Englewood. and there were not any who blamed the shooting for getting involved in the looting and riots, the outlet reported. Instead, they appeared mostly to be people who were taking advantage of the night of chaos. Among those charged was a convicted felon and registered gun holder who allegedly fled in a getaway car outside the Louis Vuitton store, leaving behind his loaded handgun with an extended magazine. Some learned about the looting through social media. A man who was caught on video handing out display cases of jewelry at the Lester Lambert store told cops he found about the looting on Facebook. A number of those who appeared before the judge were facing felony charges for the first time or had minor criminal backgrounds. These included a 20-year-old college student who told cops her pals pressured her into going, but she ditched when officers caught her walking outside Gucci with $10,000 in goods, the outlet reported. Yes, it's all fun. It's all fun until someone gets arrested. That old story about looting. You never think that it can happen to you. Yes, they're just looking to put clothes on their children's back. That's what we've actually been told. They're actually seriously saying this. Yeah. So I suppose, they could have looted Walmart instead, But no, got to loot the Gucci. Well, why shouldn't everyone have access to Gucci? Isn't that what equity is all about? Let's talk about COVID-19. This is the first time that I've talked about COVID-19. In 5 days? And I don't know. I was simply not reading any news for 3 days, something like that, 3.5 days. And I just had this strange feeling that, maybe if when I got back to the internet, people would have become sane again. No such luck. Peter Hitchens wrote in the Sunday Mail, "Actually, I have had enough. So should you have had enough. The time has come for real discontent, or there will be no end to our mistreatment and humiliation by this government. To call these people incompetent would be to pay them an overgenerous compliment. We shall see in a minute what might be a better word. This is not a personal grievance. By great good fortune, I managed a swift holiday a few weeks ago and was not caught by any sudden government panic measure, though the holiday itself, in places I love, was a sad shadow of what it once had been. So my anger about the crazy quarantining of travelers to France is not self-interested. This heartless smashing of the simple pleasures of thousands is a futile act of spite. Do you know how many people officially died of COVID-19 during the past week? Fewer than 80. In April, official deaths in that country peaked at more than 1,400 in a single day. These figures of so-called cases mean nothing, except the authorities have been looking harder for such cases and finding them, even though the people involved are usually not ill. A similar panic in New Zealand concerns an outbreak in which, at the last count, 1 person was in hospital. Everything about the figures we are given has been fraudulent and wrong. We will never know how many people were listed as COVID deaths in this country whose true cause of death was something else. The rules on classifying them were shockingly lax, and almost no postmortems were held, so we can never check. But the London government was last week forced to admit for some time its official death figures have been a wild overstatement of the facts. Somehow this colossal event was pushed onto inside pages and way down BBC bulletins. But let me tell you, the UK's total death toll has been revised down from 46,706 to 41,329, a fall of 5,377. That, as you might have noticed, is an error of more than 10%, a huge admission. They were forced into this by the brilliant forensic work of Professor Carl Hennigan and his brave colleagues at Oxford's Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine, which showed that the previous figures were so loose that they could have included car crash victims who once tested positive for COVID. Even the fatuous health commissar, Matt Hancock, had to accept that for months his department had been publishing bilge as if it was information. I promise you here that when sanity and respect for facts once again resume their reign in this country, if they ever do, that it will prove to be far worse than that. My suspicion is that the wrecking of the economy and the state-sponsored panic of these times has killed more people than COVID ever did, and the research on this is piling up too. though the BBC would prefer not to mention that either. A paper submitted to the government's own scientific advisory group, SAGE, estimated that 16,000 people had died up to May 1st, thanks to missed medical care following the shutdown of the country. They suggested another 26,000 could die by next March for the same reason. If these figures are right, and I believe they will be vindicated by hard research, the government's flailing panic killed 2 people for every 3 who died of coronavirus, and that is assuming the COVID death figures are not inflated. The scale of this error is so great that the mind turns away from it. Add to it the slow but relentless destruction of the economy and the catastrophe in the schools, and you have even more to weep over. Bit by bit, people are finding out what a recession actually means in terms of lost jobs, busted businesses, and ravaged pensions. This is all now inevitable and only weeks away. Meanwhile, thousands of teenagers have been robbed of an essential part of their education, which they can never get back. Thanks to bungles piled on top of folly, they now face stupid injustice, broken hopes, and the cold face of bureaucracy. Those responsible for this have a terrible load on their consciences. Back in March, the famous SAGE committee produced a document, Options for Increasing Adherence to Social Distancing Measures. It concluded that we were not yet frightened enough. It said a substantial number of people still do not feel personally threatened sufficiently. You see, I was talking about this earlier. That, yes, panic. We need to be panicked. We need to be afraid of everyone at all times. So we needed to be scared into compliance. It recommended the perceived level of personal threat needs to be increased among those who are complacent, using hard-hitting emotional messaging. So the hidden persuaders went to work with their doom-laden warnings, their house arrest, their claims that we are toxic to each other, and their swollen death tolls. Now they seek to keep up the anxiety levels by trying to make us wear loose, soggy muzzles. And here we are, perhaps forever, unless we begin to show a bit of spirit. Remember how we used to boast about how unflappable we were with our keep calm and carry on posters? Well, we are not unflappable. We have been well and truly flapped, and this is the price you pay for it. I should mention that I was forced to wear a mask in my new location. I'm a stranger to this neighborhood. I don't know it at all. And so it's going to take a while for me to know where things are. But there is a Walmart about a quarter of a mile or a third of a mile from where I am. And I guess that's where I was going to buy my food from because I didn't know of any other grocery stores. And Walmart announced that beginning, on the 12th, that everyone in their stores would have to wear masks. And this, at the height of the panic in Walmart, I had been at Walmart a couple of times during the height of the panic, and you didn't need to wear a mask. Now that, in British Columbia, where no one is dying, now we have to wear masks, I guess, because in order to bring the panic level up. Because when one is in a room with hundreds of other people, it is difficult, we're all wearing masks, it's difficult not to feel panicked. So I went to Shoppers Drug Mart, a few hours before I left my hotel on Douglas Street, because I thought, apparently I was told that I needed my mode of transportation. I need to have a mask available, even if I was not required to use it. And so the dread day comes when I had to pay $10 for this mask. It's a cloth mask. It's the only one they had. They said $10 for a mask. And so I put this thing on shortly before I went into Walmart. And I have to say it was very unpleasant indeed, because the sense of, constriction, that it is much more difficult to breathe. Also, it gets very moist and very hot in a hurry in the area that is covered by the mask. And I just decided I just have to do this as quickly as possible. Also, I find it very difficult to understand anyone who has a mask on. When I was at Shaw yesterday, talking with this nice young man about my internet needs. He was a mask, and it was quite wearying to be saying, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, could you say that again? What was that?" Over and over again. And of course, I wasn't wearing a mask, but I could imagine that if I was wearing a mask and he was wearing a mask, it would all be what? And so then when I was finished with, I've had to wear this mask twice now. As I say, Walmart has become my grocery store. And just a feeling of when I leave the store and take the mask off, it's as if, someone has been trying to choke me, and just this enormous feeling of relief. It's all madness, of course, absolute madness. Let's see what Toby Young has to say on lockdown skeptics. Bonkers advisor to Scottish government warns of stream of incoming infections from England and Wales. Oh no. The Sassenachs are at it again. Devi Sridhar, professor of global public health at Edinburgh University, has a piece in the New York Times on Saturday which she warned of a stream of incoming infections from England and Wales, and urged Nicola Sturgeon and other European leaders to impose a new quarantine policy whereby all visitors should be tested on arrival, quarantined for 5 days, and then tested again before being allowed out. There has to be enforced isolation until 2 negative tests at least 5 days apart, she wrote. Yes, this will probably interfere with plans to enjoy the beaches of Marbella. Oh, just shut up. You see how women, other people like her, how much they're glorying in this? It's sadism. That's what it is. Oh, yeah, you won't be able to enjoy the beaches of Marbella. Well, where do you go for a holiday, Professor Sridhar? You go to Blackpool? Do you? Enjoy the Rock? Enjoy the pier? I rather doubt it. Oh, Toby Young says this is unevidenced nonsense, even by Professor Sridhar's standards. She cites rising infections in Spain as a reason English visitors to Scotland could pose a threat, which is odd because any English holidaymakers returning from Spain have to quarantine for 14 days. And she has been accused of, this is a political statement on behalf of, the Scottish nationalists. Oh, those evil English and Welsh, they're trying to kill us. Well, as you may know, I'd like to see Scotland leave the United Kingdom. Scotland is a millstone around England's neck. And the Scottish keep carrying on as if this strange situation where the Irish have their own government, Wales has its own government, and Scotland has its own government. England is not allowed to have its own government. They somehow think that this is going to last forever. Also, the strange situation whereby England pays the bills for Northern Ireland. About 75% of all their revenues are subventions from London and Wales and Scotland. That Scotland enjoys a better welfare state than England does, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, Scotland is not in a position to pay for it. Next up, what does the hydroxychloroquine controversy tell us about medical science? Toby Young writes, there's an excellent essay in the tablet about the politics of HCQ by Norman Doidge, a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and published author. It doesn't take sides on the issue of whether HCQ is an effective prophylactic or treatment for COVID-19, but explores the question of why the issue has been so controversial and what that tells us about the state of medical science. Politics, he says. Politics. He mentions the infamous article in the British medical journal, The Lancet. Within days, that study was retracted, with the editor of one of the two most respected medical journals in the Western world conceding it was a monumental fraud. Essentially, HCQ is just a mass killer. One of the greatest mass killers ever. And here we get to the point of it. Not only are lay people confused, professionals are. All that seems certain is that there is something disturbing going on in our science, and that if and when the perfect study were to ever come along, many won't know what to believe. We live in a culture that has uncritically accepted that every domain of life is political, and that even things we think are not political are so, that all human enterprises are merely power struggles, that even the idea of truth is a fantasy and really a matter of imposing one's view on others. For a while, some held out hope that science remained an exception to this, that scientists would not bring their personal political biases into their science, and they would not be mobbed if what they said was unwelcome to one faction or another. But the sordid 2020 drama, hydroxychloroquine, which saw scientists routinely attacked for critically evaluating evidence and coming to politically inconvenient conclusions, has for many killed those hopes. Phase one of the pandemic saw the near collapse of the credible authority of much of our public health officialdom at the highest level, led by the exposure of the corruption of the World Health Organization. The crisis was deepened by the numerous reversals on recommendations, which led to the growing belief that too many officials were interpreting, bending, or speaking about the science relevant to the pandemic in a politicized way. Phase two is equally dangerous, for it shows that politicization has started to penetrate the peer review process and how studies are reported in scientific journals and, of course, in the press. Melbourne's descent into hellish dystopia. There's a good piece in Spiked by James Bolt, a resident of Melbourne, about the city's slide into totalitarianism. A couple are watching their child play in a playground. They are fined by the police. They are further than 5 kilometers from their home. A man leaves his home at 9:30 p.m. to buy some cigarettes. He too is fined $1,652. He has left his house during the citywide curfew, which comes in at 8 p.m. On Facebook, 2 men plan a protest against the state of Victoria's restrictions. Police execute a search warrant and seize their mobile phones and a computer. One is charged with incitement because he wanted to organize a protest. Public gatherings are limited to 2 people and only for exercise, physical, not of our basic rights. This is the situation in Melbourne, Australia's second largest city right now in a supposedly liberal democracy. Well, 2020 was the year that liberal democracies died. The government said, all we have to do is to proclaim an emergency, and your rights constitutionally guaranteed or merely historic are gone. They're disappeared. And if you want to complain about this, you are a murderer. You are literally a murderer, unless, of course, you're out, in the streets to complain about white supremacy or to loot or riot. In which case that sort of public gathering is fully acceptable. Now, I saw this coming. I'm not pleased to see that my fear has been vindicated, but here we go. Victoria's Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, has suggested face masks should be mandatory every year to prevent people catching seasonal flu. The Mail has the story. Sutton indicated on Tuesday elements of the restricted lockdown protocols could be here to stay well after the state defeats COVID-19. The state defeats COVID-19. Take that, you nasty virus. The flu isn't as severe as COVID-19, but it is still deadly because millions and millions of people get infected, he explained. About 3,000 Australians usually die every year from the seasonal flu, but infection rates have been trending down since April, probably because they've been counted as COVID cases instead. With all the restrictions put in place because of COVID, it has absolutely brought the flu in check, Sutton says. And Toby Young comments, this is what happens if you don't stand up to the tyrants, folks. As I said, last week, we are now at, crossroads. And to mix metaphors here, speak now or forever hold your peace. Because unless there is a backlash, unless there is a counter-revolution, liberty is gone. And it is gone forever. Finished. But no, it's an emergency. Again, I'm sure Carl Schmitt would be very, very pleased. His notion of the exception. Well, this is tremendous exception. Oh, it's a pandemic. It's not just a coronavirus. It's a novel coronavirus. Oh, my God. Novel. That just means new. No, but it's novel. It's a novel coronavirus. It's unlike anything ever seen in the history of disease in the history of medicine. Now, earlier I was talking about Trump and his musings about a do-over for the election. Toby Young writes, remember the outrage on the liberal left last month after Trump raised the possibility of postponing the November election? This was treated as the last word in undemocratic populist demagoguery. How dare he? Well, Jacinda Ardern has done precisely that, postponed the New Zealand general election from September 19th to October 17th. Ms. Ardern said on Monday that the new date would allow parties to plan around the range of circumstances we will be campaigning under. What could that possibly mean? Can't she speak in English? Earlier this week, the country's largest city went back into lockdown. This decision gives all parties time over the next 9 weeks to campaign and the Electoral Commission enough time to ensure an election can go ahead, Ardern said, adding that she had absolutely no intention of allowing any further delays to the vote. The opposition National Party has argued the election should be delayed as restrictions on campaigning mean Ardern had an unfair advantage. Restrictions were imposed on Auckland on Wednesday after a number of new infections were identified in the city. 9 new coronavirus cases were confirmed on Monday, bringing the number of active cases linked to the Auckland cluster to 58. Ooh. The outbreak was initially traced back to the members of one family. The announcement that new cases had been discovered shocked the country, which had recorded no locally transmitted cases for more than 3 months. Toby Young comments, in normal times, this would be greeted with outrage. The toothy tyrant is imprisoning New Zealand citizens in secure facilities if they test positive for the virus, along with every member of their household. In addition to this grotesque violation of civil liberties, she has now postponed the general election and is planning to remain in office after her 3-year term has expired. But as was pointed out in the recent postcard from New Zealand, she'll almost certainly win in October in a landslide. And I'll end the talk from Toby Young with a quotation, which he gives us from St. Anthony the Great. A time is coming when men will go mad, and when they see someone who is not mad, they will attack him, saying, you are mad. You are not like us. Yes, Alex Berenson says, attention citizens, your Department of Pandemia reminds you that the less dangerous the thing seems to be, the greater the measures your department must take to protect you. If you will not recognize the risk and comply, your department will comply for you. This is science. Attention, citizens. Oh, yes. Oh, wow. This is the publishing event of the year. Announced today, Crown, an imprint of Random House Publishing Group, a division of Penguin Random House LLC, but which, by the way, is owned by the Germans, Bertelsmann, announced today it will publish American Crisis by Andrew Cuomo. You know, the Love Gov, dishing it 24/7. On October 13th, a revealing behind-the-scenes account of his experience leading New York State through the COVID-19 epidemic, American Crisis, is an important chronicle of this unprecedented moment in history, an urgent assessment of the factors that have and continue to impede our national response to a devastating health and economic catastrophe, and a powerful testament to true leadership in times of extreme crisis. I guess if true leadership is defined as killing thousands of people needlessly, I thought the Love Gov there was supposed to be, nose to the grindstone, 16, 18 hours a day. When would he possibly have time to write a book? Of course, I suppose that, well, he hasn't. Berenson jokes, coming next, Fighting Crime by Lori Lightfoot, Managing a Booming Economy by Bill de Blasio, and It's Not About the Sperm by J.B. Pritzker. Yes, you remember exponential growth when we were, oh yes, you people don't understand exponential growth. Okay, oh wow, that's pretty shocking claim there. Berenson says, one of my favorite April tweets, exponential growth, COVID style, don't you understand math? It's gonna kill us all. Back on April 4th, he had written, if I get 1 penny today, 3 next week, 9 in week 2, 27 in week 3, 76 in week 4, 148 in week 5, 201 in week 6, 198 in week 7, 115 in week 8, 122 in week 9, 93 in week 10. In 10 weeks, I'll have $9.93. I'll be rich. Don't you get it? Or you just hate old people? And a reminder here from Frank Burton on Twitter. SV News has a video of, hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Korea. Absolutely massive protests have erupted across South Korea. Protesters are demanding a loosing of COVID-19 restrictions. Burton comments, conformist, obedient South Korea protests the sanitary dictatorship, while rugged individualist Americans cower in their homes and cover their faces. Korea and Japan are now officially more libertarian than the United States of America. It's an emergency, people. It's a pandemic. It's the novel coronavirus. It's not just the coronavirus. It's the novel coronavirus. Oh my God, it's novel. And another story about Alex Berenson. This is from Fox News. Former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson accused Google of skewing search results to tie capitalism to racism. Berenson, who has gained a following online for his skepticism of stay-at-home orders and mask wearing as means to fight the coronavirus pandemic, shared screenshots of the results of a search of the phrase socialism and racism. However, Google automatically provided search results for capitalism and racism, while giving the option to search only for socialism and capitalism. Results that appear include a 2019 article from the Neighborhood Funders Group called Capitalism and Racism, Conjoined Twins, and a May 2020 article from the New Yorker called Is Capitalism Racist? Fox News was able to verify the search results. In addition, when searching capitalism and racism, Google does not include socialism in its results. I assumed this was a joke, but it's real. If you Google socialism and racism, the top result you'll be offered is capitalism and racism, Berenson wrote on Twitter. Big tech gets more openly ideological by the day, and weird that one of the world's most profitable companies hates capitalism so much. They're toll collectors. That's what Google is. They're toll collectors. Not really, in the rugged individual game. I think I'll reserve to tomorrow this talk about autism and transsexualism, because I'm running out of time here. Canada's motto, from sea to shining sea. I suspect that Canada's new model is we're not racist. Really, we are so not racist. Also, model is we're not racist. Really, we are so not racist. Also, we hate Trump. What a joke. It's rather long for a motto. But there's this fellow in Canada who calls himself Ed the Sock. His real name is Stephen Kersner. He's been around, 20 years or more. He used to be right wing, pretty controversial, right? And then he figured out some years ago that the right wing is not allowed in Canada, so he became pretty much like everyone else. He's not very funny at all. He's married to this redhead woman who's a cosplayer. Very attractive woman, I must say. Several Liberal MPs are speaking out against one of the party's online superfans following disgusting insults targeting NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's turban. At the sock, a sock puppet voiced by comedian Stephen Kersner, who is best known as a Canadian late-night TV host and former Much Music VJ, has recently sought to resurrect his career as a centrist, a political commentator. The FU Podcast Network, a platform Kersner launched in 2018 promising political commentary to challenge voices on the left and right, has recruited pro-liberal Twitter users as podcast hosts, welcomed prominent Liberal politicians as guests, and even received a congratulatory letter from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. In a statement to Press Progress in 2019, Kersner described Ed the Sock as Canada's leading celebrity voice on the side of the progressives, and suggested he had become a reluctant hero for moderate progressives who looked to him as Trudeau's defender. In defending Trudeau's government over the We Charity scandal, Kersner has repeatedly honed in on NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's turban. Speaking as Ed the Sock on a July podcast, Kersner said Jagmeet Singh is dumb as a post. The only bright thing above his neck is what he wears on his head. A week later, Kersner continued with his running gag, tweeting, "I've determined the brightest thing about Jagmeet Singh is his turban." The next day, Kersner encouraged his nearly 50,000 followers to start calling Jagmeet Singh Jughead Singh, when some of his followers expressed concern that the nickname sounded racist. Kersner insisted it had nothing to do with a turban. Mark Gretsch had responded, "That sounds like borderline racist take on him wearing a turban. I doubt that was your intent here, but I can certainly see that being taken as such." He responded, "Let those that go there, go there. Jughead is a dumb Archie character and not a term for a not smart person. Nothing to do with a turban." Kersner's most recent effort to encourage liberals to start calling Singh Jughead have backfired dramatically, with Ed the Sock trending nationally on Twitter and condemnations from members of parliament. In response to accusations of racism, Kersner tweeted, "Just because he's a brown person doesn't mean he gets a free pass." NDP Adon Davies tweeted, "This is pure racism. This liberal troll should be blocked and ignored. I'm looking for liberal MPs on Twitter to condemn this blatant hatred." Oh dear. Oh, it was a dog whistle as well. In his 2019 book, Singh described being targeted by bullies and physically attacked as a child because he wore a patka, a head covering similar to a turban worn by Sikh boys. Singh wrote that he was regularly tormented with racist slurs, including diaperhead, paki, and jughead. How jughead could possibly be considered to be a racist slur. Of course, he didn't used to call himself Jagmeet Singh. In fact, Jagmeet Singh is not, my understanding, to be his given name. That is to say, he used to be called Jimmy Dhaliwal. Now, Dhaliwal, of course, is a well-known Sikh name. So he went from Jimmy Dhaliwal to, I see that Wikipedia has actually removed this information about his given name. Yes, it would seem that Wikipedia has done that. But in any event, his name was Jimmy Dhaliwal, and he didn't think that was Sikh enough. So he changed it to Jagmeet Singh. Singh, of course, means lion. All Sikhs must have the name Singh somewhere in their name. Kersner told Press Progress that he felt Davies' tweet was highly inappropriate and accused the NDP MP of engaging in online bullying. He downplayed his use of the term jughead as a comedic device, claiming it is no different than Justin Trudeau being called Turdo by a conservative. The name Jughead was a sound-alike play on his name, Kersner said, not mocking his name's ethnicity, just playing off these similar sounds. And again, paragraphs of him justifying himself, making a joke about someone's name. "I will not apologize for being racist because I'm not." You don't ever want to find yourself in that situation. Since Jagmeet Singh was elected leader of the New Democratic Party, he has faced overt racism simply because of his faith. Minister of Digital Government Joyce Murray told Press Progress, "We have a Minister of Digital Government? What could this woman possibly do? I condemn racist comments no matter where they come from." Overt racism. This is a guy saying during the last election campaign, lectured Canadians on how racist they were. I suppose that's what drew Singh's parents to Canada in the 1980s, was the tremendous racism of Canada. And of course, despite this horrendous racism in Canada, a fellow called Jagmeet Singh, wearing lurid turbans and with a beard down to his sternum, was elected leader of the New Democratic Party. Health Minister Paddy Hajdu likened Kersner's comment against Mr. Singh to the threats and violence many others face as elected leaders, and suggested his insults are dumbing down political debate. All too often, people descend to belittling language to describe others with different perspectives or beliefs. Oh, you mean like right-wingers? People who are against abortion, say? people who don't believe that 5-year-olds should be exposed to homosexual propaganda, or told that, you're a boy. Everyone tells you're a boy. Maybe you're actually a girl. Yeah, because liberal Canada is such a liberal country. Yes, and we never use belittling language to describe others with different perspectives or beliefs. Again, Schrodinger's cat, you know, of course they do. Of course they use belittling language. They use very strong language indeed. They threaten to destroy people. These are so-called, liberals, to destroy others with different perspectives or beliefs. Another liberal MP, Adam Vaughan, said bad puns or sounded like words like the hashtag sheer nonsense go hand in hand with political debate, but admitted they sometimes cross a line. I guess they sometimes cross the line when you're criticizing a Sikh. I'm not going to read any more of this story. It just goes on forever. And no, you see, Jagmeet Singh went on about how terrible Canadians were, and his family, his party was devastated in the election. The party lost about half its seats, and under normal circumstances, that would have been the end for Jagmeet Singh. But I guess he is untouchable because he is a Sikh. Oh, that is the show for today. What's coming up? Oh, on Theater Thursday, I'm going to be discussing Charles Bronson in Michael Winner's 1974 film about vigilantism, Death Wish. And on the book club on Friday, which was delayed from last week, I'm going to be discussing Piers Paul Reed's history of the Dreyfus affair. Excellent book, one I've read many times. So I will be back on the air tomorrow, Wednesday, at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to send a donation to this show, my PayPal account is under Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send money to me directly through Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that all of my dear viewers and listeners manage to find some genuine connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.